Manx Radio's Update with Beth Espey.
Well, Fastamai, good evening. Welcome to your daily news roundup, where you can catch up with what's been happening around the Isle of Man today. Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to hear about the conclusion of the tribunal involving Kroger and its former CEO. Also tonight, government's recorded a higher than expected surplus. What does that actually mean? And just as you're about to think about what to have for tea, we'll have more on the plans to end the discharge of sewage into Laxey Bay. You're welcome for that. Also, we'll keep an eye on the weather, the traffic and travel as well. And if you spot anything when you're out and about and you can let us know, that would be great. You can text 166 177 or email us studio@manxradio.com. We'll start with a news headline roundup with Chanel. Fastamai.
People are being urged to be aware of fake posts on social media which are purporting to be linked to Manx Radio. It's understood they are appearing on Facebook, with people being invited to phone overseas call centres as a result. These posts are not from Manx Radio. Closing statements have been delivered in the tribunal between Kroger and former Chief Executive Dickon Sargent over deferred salary payments. Mr. Sargent claims repayment was due after a 2022 funding round, while Kroger argues it was tied to a £10 million Rise 4 seismic survey. Both sides agree salary is owed, but Kroger disputes the timeline and additional claims for holiday pay and legal costs. And the foundations of the Isle of Man's rating system needs to be fixed before an all-island leisure rate could be introduced. Ramsey Commissioner Ewan McGuinness says while he's interested in the idea being floated by one of the town's MHKs, he doesn't think it'll get very far.
Any move to just replicate that in the East also won't actually achieve what he's wanting to achieve. It's just, I think, fundamentally, practically not the right move.
In international news, the UK Prime Minister is accusing the Conservatives of running a one-nation experiment in open borders. Net migration was down 20% in the year to June. A former British soldier has been found guilty of spying for Iran. Daniel Khalif, who previously admitted escaping from prison under a catering van, was convicted of breaching the Official Secrets and Terrorism Acts. And Frank Lampard's back in football management. The former Chelsea and England midfielders taken over at Coventry. Those are your headlines. News at 6.
Thank you very much indeed, Chanel. Now the weather brought to you by Manx Glass and Glazing. So cloudy with the odd spot of rain to start this evening, but then it'll become mainly dry if you want to get out and about. Fresh to strong south or southeast winds. Minimum temperatures will be around 7, but those temperatures will rise by the end of the night. Largely cloudy, but mainly dry tomorrow morning. Maybe just the odd outbreak of drizzle. Then a heavier band of rain will arrive in the afternoon and evening. There'll also be a fresh to strong south or southeast wind. That will increase in the evening as well. Maximum temperatures tomorrow, though, will be around 13, so it is a little bit warmer. Saturday, not too bad. Mainly dry, largely cloudy, but still the risk of a few outbreaks of rain at times. Sunset this evening was just after 4. Sunrise tomorrow morning will be 12 minutes past 8.
Manx Glass and Glazing can supply and install single, double and triple glazing. Call 674 573 or visit the showroom on the Snugborough Trading Estate.
TE Carbon provide new memorial stones, grave renovations, new inscriptions and fire hearths. Visit us at Hope Street, Castletown or at Broadway, Douglas, or call 844 440. TE Carbon, here when you need us.
Most builders start with a hammer and saw. Manx Construction start with ideas and imagination. For new build, extension or home office, Manx Construction offer full service from planning to completion. Call Tony on 452 688.
We all need peace of mind. That's where Peace of Mind Manx Will Writing Services can help you. From just £149 plus VAT. Call 671 001 or go to peaceofmind.co.im.
At Bond Fabrics, we're not just a fabric shop. As well as curtains and upholstery and dress and costume fabrics, we've knitting and crocheting wools, made-to-measure curtain and blind service, plus poles and tracks. Visit Strand Street, Douglas, call 611856 or see bondfabrics.im.
You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio. It's coming up to 5:05. Just wanted to give you a few more details about what Chanel mentioned in the headlines there about those fake posts on social media, especially Facebook, which are claiming to be posted by Manx Radio. Now, these posts are malicious, and what they do is link you to invites to phone overseas call centres. If you click on them, these posts obviously, not from Manx Radio. One which we've been made aware of apparently features a photograph of the Chief Minister, Alfred Cannon, with an invite to answer some questions in the link. And at the end of this so-called survey, you're invited to call a UK mobile phone number, which appears to be the start of a money-based scam. If you're using the official Manx Radio Facebook page, you'll be fine. But in the meantime, just be careful for any unexpected posts on your timeline that claim to be from Manx Radio, especially if they do ask you to call a UK mobile phone number. And if you're not sure about any post, do not respond. Don't call any phone numbers if you're invited to do so. And we'll get more details as soon as we can about that. So 5.5 minutes then past 5, and the tribunal involving the former Kroger CEO Dickon Sargent and the energy firm itself has concluded, with closing statements delivered earlier today. To break this down for us, we're joined by Christian now in the studio. Christian, first, just remind us what this case is all about.
So the dispute centres on deferred salary payments in 2020 during a financial crisis at Kroger. Directors, including Mr. Sargent, agreed to defer their salaries. Mr. Sargent claims he was promised repayment with a 15% uplift during the company's next funding round. Kroger, however, argues that payment was contingent on securing funding for a 3D seismic survey, which hasn't yet happened.
So if I'm right, the disagreement isn't over whether Mr. Sargent is owed money, but rather when he should be paid.
Yeah, exactly. So both sides agree he's owed deferred salary, but the timing and terms are the things that are disputed. Kroger maintains the agreement was tied to raising around £10 million to complete the survey, a funding stage that they're calling EQ1 and EQ1S. Mr. Sargent, on the other hand, argues the agreement referred to any funding round, pointing to a raise completed in June 2022 as meeting that criteria.
So the conclusion was today. This is the third day of the tribunal. What were the key arguments made during the closing statements?
Mr. Sargent's legal team claimed the definition of the next funding round supports their case and criticised Kroger's counter-argument that it was simply bad drafting. They also question why the company attempted to wind itself up after securing £1 million in funding. On the other hand, Kroger's representatives argued Mr. Sargent had significant control over company decisions, including the disputed agreement, and said the deferred salary terms haven't been met. They also challenged his claims for holiday pay, stating there's no record of unused leave.
So what happens now then?
Well, the tribunal chair says there's lots to consider before a ruling can be made. Both sides were thanked for their conduct during the hearing, and a decision will be issued in due course.
Christian, thank you very much. Naturally, we'll bring you the outcome of that decision as soon as the ruling is announced. 8 minutes past 5. Investigations into the death of a police officer on the Isle of Man are continuing. Sergeant Stephen Hall died earlier this month. News editor Tessa Hawley joins me in the studio now. And Tessa, you were at the opening of Mr. Hall's inquest today. What did we learn from that?
That's right. So you might remember that on the 14th of November, the Isle of Man Constabulary announced the death of one of its police sergeants, Stephen Kenneth Hall. At the time, the constabulary said the circumstances of his death were not being treated as suspicious, but it would be the subject of a coroner's inquest. And today, at Douglas Courthouse, those proceedings were started.
And I understand the coroner said today the investigations into exactly what happened are continuing.
He did. Coroner of Inquest James Brooks was presiding over today's short hearing, and it was a hearing which naturally did contain some upsetting information. He confirmed that Sergeant Hall was found on the railway lines in Ballaugh. That was near to the Ravensdale River just before 6 p.m. on the 13th of November. And a post-mortem showed the 48-year-old Manxman had suffered a fracture to one of the vertebrae in his neck.
So what happens now, Tessa?
Coroner Brooks expressed his condolences to Mr. Hall's family, and he released his body so that the funeral arrangements can now take place. Mr. Hall's inquest will be reconvened at a later date once those investigations that we mentioned just previously have been concluded.
Tessa, thank you very much indeed. You're listening to Update here on Manx Radio. It's coming up to 10 past 5. There's still time to have your say on plans to end the discharge of sewage into Laxey Bay. The Manx Utilities has been hosting public information events this week to showcase the proposal for a new regional sewage treatment strategy for Garth. Today's session at Baldry Methodist Church Hall is on until 7:30. Simon Richardson went along to the session yesterday to find out more about what was going on.
There's one thing the people of Laxey and Baldrine and Manx Utilities are in total agreement about, that the pumping of raw sewage into Laxey Bay must cease as soon as possible. Just how that's achieved has been a different story. Various schemes, from the creation of a sewage treatment plant alongside Laxey Harbour to pumping sewage to the Mary Veg treatment works at Santon, have been ruled out due to a potent mixture of public outrage and logistical practicality. In the meantime, the contents of Laxey and Baldrine sewers have continued to empty into one of the island's most treasured marine environments. Nobody from Manx Utilities was able to speak to me when I went down to the Laxey meeting, but a few members of the local community were less reticent.
The sooner the better. I've got 3 children that currently swim in the water, the stuff that we've got out there at the moment. I suppose it's more frustration, slowly getting to anger. I don't know how long it's going to take, 2 years, 3 years, but the sooner the better.
It's all very interesting. I think I'm still a bit disappointed that the water quality isn't going to be excellent, so the water quality is still going to be what they call good. I think that if we're going to have a brand new all singing, all dancing treatment works, that needs to be future-proof really, and at the moment it doesn't seem to be future-proof.
The major thing that comes out of it for me is that the scheme is designed, as far as I can see, to work to the European Bathing Water Quality Directives, rather than what I would like to see is a prevention of untreated sewage going into the sea and the killing of bacteria and so on. But the standard appears to be towards bathing quality and not necessarily the elimination of untreated sewage going into Laxey Bay.
So, mixed views as you might expect, some in favour, others poo-pooing the idea. With the planning process still to come, this scheme has some way to go before it becomes reality. Manx Utilities Chair John Wannenberg says he hopes it can go ahead and enable the authority to finally complete its long-awaited regional sewage treatment strategy for the island, and in doing so support bathing water to be proud of for generations of community enjoyment. Whether he'll be flushed with success or forced to float yet another compromise scheme, only time will tell.
Simon Richardson reporting. Can you do better with the puns? Incidentally, we should say that we have been invited to speak to Manx Utilities today, and Simon is there now at Baldrine, and we'll bring you that interview tomorrow. So, as I say, still time if you want to get down to Baldrine Methodist Church to have a look at the plans. The information evening is on until 7:30 p.m. 12.5 minutes past 5, government recorded a higher than expected surplus for the 2023-24 financial year. Now, the accounts for the 12-month period show revenue exceeded expenditure by £18.3 million, despite the budget only forecasting a £0.9 million surplus. Sean Cowper reports.
Spending for the financial year ending March 2024 was higher than expected, with government services costing £1.324 billion. The figure included £57 million in supplementary budgets for 4 departments and is £120 million higher than the previous 12 months. However, revenue exceeded expectations. Incoming funds of £1.343 billion was £85.4 million more than forecast in the budget. Treasury says the higher than anticipated figure is mainly due to income tax receipts being greater than budgeted for. The current market value of government's external reserves also increased in the same period by £114 million to £1.926 billion. The annual report, which has been published ahead of December's sitting of Tynwald, says Treasury's goal continues to ensure sustainable finances to allow reserves to recover from the financial shocks experienced in recent years and maintain a strong financial base to support economic growth on the island.
Sean Cowper reporting.
Manx Radio Travel, driven by Quayside Tyres and Service Centre.
So as far as we know, all looking pretty good on the roads as you maybe head home this evening. Again, if you do spot anything when you're out and about and you're able to let us do so, that's really helpful. But nothing on the police pages, which is good news. Roadworks-wise, if they were there this morning, they're probably going to be there this evening. You can find the full list of those at manxradio.com. All looking okay down at the airport and at the steam packet as well. The Manxman is due into Douglas at around 6 and we'll be heading out for Heysham again at around about 7:45.
Quayside Tyres and Service Centre with 1 year's free engine warranty from Castrol. Get more with
Quayside.
It's just coming up to 5:15. We mentioned the public meeting that's happening in Baldrine. There's also one being held this evening to discuss the pedestrianisation of Market Square in Castletown. Now, the commissioners are looking to close the square to vehicles all year round following a series of summer closures. We know it has been met with mixed opinions, including those from former Castletown MHK's Tony Brown and Richard Ronan. If you're interested in this meeting, local democracy reporter Emma Draper has the details for us.
The meeting is being held at 7:30pm at Morton Hall and has been organised by Mr Brown, Mr Ronan and the former chair of the Commissioners, John Kringle. They say the Commissioners have point blank refused to consult with any businesses or residents in the town. It's currently closed to vehicles until March 2025 after a road closure order was implemented after the summer closure finished this year. The group say the Commissioners did this leaving residents totally unaware. The local authority maintains it has consulted businesses and is acting in the best interests of the community. Board members, the Infrastructure Minister and officers, as well as the two current MHKs, have been invited to the public meeting this evening, but Chair Beth Cannon has confirmed she will not be in attendance. Paul Costain, the captain of the parish of Rushen, will be chairing the meeting. The group says they would like to encourage members of the public who are for and against the decision, as well as people who are interested in what's going on, to come along.
That is Emma Draper reporting there. So 7:30pm at Morton Hall in Castletown. You'd be very welcome to go along and have your say. And we'll be reporting on what happens tomorrow morning on Manx Radio. 16 minutes past 5. Now, you might have heard in the international news today that senators in Australia have passed laws prohibiting under 16s from having social media accounts. What do you make of this one? It's a worldwide first and a ban which some critics have branded too blunt an instrument. Would we be likely to see similar laws more widely introduced? Well, Siobhan Fletcher has this report.
The new law in Australia will mean platforms like TikTok, Instagram and X, formerly Twitter, could be fined £25 million if they don't put in measures to stop children accessing their sites. They have a year to work out how to implement the ban before the legislation comes into force next November. And the UK's Technology Secretary has already hinted that the government there could follow suit.
I'm keeping all options open. The problem is at the moment there's very little evidence. We need to know precisely what the impact is and it's a frustration of mine that tech companies themselves aren't building this evidence.
Peter Kyle is urging the regulator Ofcom to make sure protection measures are in place ahead of the introduction of a new Online Safety Act. Meanwhile, Stuart Stevens' son Ollie was killed following a social media dispute. He blames a lack of regulation for his death.
I firmly believe that I lost my son because of weak governance and poor legislation, full stop. I can't show you any of the stuff that we saw on his phone, but it's horrific. And a lot of that stuff you can't unsee, and especially as a child, that's going to change them as an adult.
But how do we protect kids here on the Isle of Man from the harms of social media when we don't have such legislation in place? I asked Samantha Holmes, Manx Care's named professional for contextual safeguarding.
So obviously all of the new phones have now got many platforms in terms of social media and how obviously people can contact these children, particularly Snapchat. You know, it's very, very easy for anybody to add anybody and it gives you location. So I think it's been open and honest with the children in terms of, has anyone recently contacted you that you don't know? Have you added anybody that you don't know? Because obviously our children are constantly on the phone, so it's ping, ping, ping with messages. That's normal. So I suppose it's just the parents, you know, exploring that with them in terms of keeping them safe and ensuring that they've got passwords on the phones. And if they have got passwords, can the parents have the passwords so that they can access it? And if the child starts to be really secretive around the phone, I think that's when that first initial maybe red flag would be, well, why do you not want me to have a look in your phone? What is it that is there that you don't want mum or dad or parent or carer to see at that time, would be my recommendation.
Sam Malone from Manx Care speaking to Siobhan Fletcher there. It's a really interesting one, this. It's all across the BBC this evening. And I wonder what you think about whether we should maybe look at banning under 16s from having social media accounts. How would that go down in your house? Probably not very well. It might be something you'd like to talk about on Mannin Line. It's an open line again tomorrow from midday. You can call in 66 13 68 during the programme from 12. Or if you'd like to leave a message ahead of time, 682 631 is a number and that can be played out on the programme. Or you can text and email as normal as well. Coming up to 5:20. Around 3,000 people on the Isle of Man have been impacted by a delay in rolling out the shingles vaccine, and it's not yet clear how the vaccine programme, which is hoped will be restarted in January next year, will be funded in the long term. Now, Manx Care stopped providing the vaccination last year, and any leftover stock has now been depleted. The new Health and Social Care Minister Claire Christian has faced questions about this in the House of Keys this week.
In April 2023, Manx Care paused the shingles vaccination programme following the change to the recommended product being used and changed to eligibility and dose. Stocks of the previous vaccine became depleted and the new product has a significantly higher cost. In April 2024, the department instructed that the programme be resumed, with the additional funding being allocated from the department's budget. Manx Care have been instructed to recommence the vaccination programme as soon as possible and will be starting by early January at the latest.
I wonder if the Minister could just confirm then the Department of Health and Social Care funding for the shingles programme was in-year funding approved from memory, so there was funding available from the department this year. Does that mean that funding is also going to be provided for Manx Care to continue the shingles programme next year, or are they going to be expected to find the significantly increased cost out of their own existing budget, which we've already established is going to be inadequate?
Again, I can tell the Honourable Member that yes, it was the in-year funding has been approved, but looking forward for the future, I would obviously have to go back to Manx Care and obviously the DHSC, and we would work that out.
Has the Minister any data in terms of the number of people who were actually impacted by the suspension?
Approximately 3,000 people may have been impacted. However, just to caveat that not all patients would take up the offer of the vaccination, even if eligible, which I mentioned in my earlier remarks, that the Public Health believe the uptake will be around about 40%, which the assumptions have been based.
That is the new Health and Social Care Minister Claire Christian, who was speaking in the House of Keys this week, addressing concerns from her political colleagues, the Arbury Carstana Malou MHK Jason Morehouse and the former DHSC Minister Laurie Hooper about the rollout of the shingles vaccine. 22 minutes past 5. Now, Manx Utilities this week has recorded a loss of £717,000 over the past financial year. While it's still in the red, it is, though, a significant improvement on the previous annual record, as Lewis Foster reports.
That's right. Over the 2022 to 23 financial year, Manx Utilities recorded a loss of £42 million. The reason partly for the difference the following year can be seen in its cost of sales, whereas previously that amounted to circa £140 million. In 2023 to 24, that total amounted to £69 million. So whereas the overall turnover was £20 million lower than the previous year, the amount saved between 2023 and 24 elsewhere puts the MUA closer to the black. The figures have been published in the Manx Utilities' latest annual report. In his opening statement, Chair Douglas North MHK John Wannenberg says this financial year has again been dominated by energy prices, the cost of living and the energy transition. Another reason for the difference in losses year on year is wholesale energy prices, which Mr Wannenberg says fell from the start of 2023 but increased during the second half of the year before falling again from November. The Chair says this is what allowed the board to phase the implementation of the electricity tariff increase and to not implement the full increase announced for 2023 to 24. The reduction in wholesale energy prices at the start of this year, he says, has further enabled the board to implement a 5% reduction in electricity tariff unit rates. On the cost of living crisis, he says the MUA is very aware of the financial pressures these tariffs put on customers, and the company is continuing to monitor market prices and keep tariff levels under review. There's a warning, though, that wholesale energy prices remain volatile and higher than pre-crisis levels.
Lewis Foster reporting. Sport now with Darren Timpson.
Good evening. Starting with FC Isle of Man, the club has announced Manx footballer Jack Carmada has returned to the club for the remainder of the season. Carmada played for the Ravens during the first 2 seasons of the club and scored 3 goals. Manager Paul Jones said it was an easy decision to bring him back to the club. Moving on, in an upcoming Manx boxer has told Manx Radio he wants to follow in the footsteps of his brother as he prepares for his second professional fight. Sam Rennie, a younger brother of Matthew Magic Rennie, is in his first year as a professional and already has aspirations of making it in the sport. The 22-year-old made his debut back in March after moving to Australia 2 years ago and won his fight with wins in each round. Initially, Sam intended on sightseeing in the country but is now set to take on Indonesian fighter Dedi Elite tomorrow night in Perth, 8 p.m. local time. The island's youngest professional boxer has labelled his brother an inspiration.
My brother's a big inspiration to me as well. I want to follow in his footsteps, but I think next year will be a good year for me, a busy year. I'm looking at getting 4 to 5 fights in Australia and Asia and a few other places, so that's something to look forward to. But yeah, like you said, the boxing's unforgiving sport, so you can't look too far ahead. You have to take it one fight at a time, so I'm focused on tomorrow, but like I say, I believe in my abilities and I believe I can go far. So 2025 is looking like a good year, what we've got planned so far. I've got a good fight here now tomorrow night in the city of Perth. I've got a good tough opponent, so it's one that I'm looking forward to and it's one that I'm ready for. You can't really slip up too early in your career. I know there's a lot of boxers that say that you shouldn't really care about that they call it that undefeated record, but if you want to go somewhere in a sport, you need to get off to a good start. So like you say, it's only my second fight, but I've took a very good opponent. Like usually back in Britain, there's these journeymen, they're called journeymen, and they're these lads, you can bring them in and they're only in to see out the rounds and get a paycheck, and they're not really there to win. Whereas on this side of the world, they're hard to come by. Everyone on this side of the world is coming to beat you, and everyone's trying to beat you. There's no one coming in just to get paid and go home. Like, so every fight, including my first fight there in March and this one tomorrow, they're difficult fights. So I've got to be on the ball, I've got to be on my A game. There's no room for slipping up.
That is Sam Rennie, who was speaking to us from Perth a little while ago, and we do wish him all the best for that fight tomorrow. As we say, it's going to be 8 p.m. local time, so we will bring you details of that as soon as we have it. But that is all from Update this evening. Thank you so much for your company, and as ever, you can find out more about all the stories we've been talking about at manxradio.com. We've got the Manx newscast as well. You can hear the longer interviews, the bits that we can't play on air, and a whole host of other information on there too. And if you'd like to comment on anything, as I say, you've got Man in Line, but you can also do so on our social media pages. Do stay with Manx Radio this evening, because coming up next, it's Shaq Lair with Marilyn Crellin. Chris Kinney will be with you from 6 with greatest hits, some brilliant music, competitions galore, so do join him for that. Then time for a little light music with Maurice Powell from 9, and Rianne will be here from 10 with After Hours. She was sporting quite a hairstyle yesterday, so our expectations are high for this evening, Ree. Have a lovely evening, whatever you're doing, and join us then for Friday's update from 5 p.m. tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.